What is a millennial? According to the internet, a millennial is one of three things. 1. Denoting or relating to a period of 1,000 years. 2. Denoting or relating to an anniversary of 1,000 years. Or 3. A person reaching young adulthood in the early 21st century. This third definition is the most interesting to me because I think that it makes me a millennial, and I don't know how I feel about that. To try and better understand it, I decided to do some research on the millennial generation. Some sites were pretty helpful, and some not so much. But before I get into millennials, let's rewind. People have been naming generations for over a century, starting with the Lost Generation. Members of the Lost Generation were born between 1880 and 1900. They fought in and lived through World War I. Because of this, many were skeptical of authority and disillusioned with government. Many famous writers were members of this generation, including Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. After the Lost Generation came the Greatest. The Greatest Generation occurred from 1901 to 1924. Members of this generation are called the Greatest because they grew up in the Great Depression and lived through and fought in World War II. The Silent Generation was born between 1925 and 1945. They were children during World War II, and as a generation were seen as silent compared to their parents' generation. A lot of change occurred during their lifetimes, and from a numbers perspective, this is a small generation. The post-World War II years from 1946 to 1964 gave us the baby boomers. This generation got their name from the boom in children when soldiers returned from World War II. They participated in the Civil Rights Movement and witnessed the first moon landing. They fought in and against the Vietnam War and waited out the Cold War. Gen Xers were born between 1965 and 1980. They are simultaneously seen as realistic and as slackers. This generation witnessed and participated in a variety of important national and world events, such as the fall of the Berlin Wall, Operation Desert Storm, and the Rodney King riots. Now back to millennials. The millennial generation includes those born between 1980 and 2000. However, this range, like the range for any generation, is debated and has a little wiggle room depending on who you ask. The name millennials was first used to categorize people in this generation by Neil Howe in 1991 in his book Generations. This name was chosen because the people of this generation would be coming of age in the new millennium. Before being referred to as millennials, this generation was called a variety of things, including Echo Boomers, Gen Next, and most commonly, Gen Y, a lazy alphabetical continuation after Gen X. Regardless of what you call it, this generation has been associated with a variety of opinions, stereotypes, and assumptions. Millennials are sometimes categorized as coddled, entitled, and narcissistic, but they can also be categorized as ambitious, optimistic, and empathetic. Although this generation is still fairly young, members have experienced and participated in many important events, including the terrorist attacks on September 11th, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Great Recession, the election of Barack Obama, and the rise of the smartphone. To round out my investigation of millennials, I decided to talk to a member of the Greatest Generation to get her thoughts on the subject. So, Grandma, you ready to answer some questions?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, now what is your name?
Martha Charles.
And how old are you?
How old are you? 100?
Do you know what generation you're part of?
The greatest.
Yeah, there you go. How do you know me?
You are my granddaughter.
Yeah. Do you know what generation I am?
You are part of the baby.
No, Mama's
Your
part of
mother's a baby boomer. You are part of the
Millennial.
millennial.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's okay, Grandma. You didn't have to. Do you know what a millennial is? Or what is a millennial?
A millennial is a group of people.
So what do you think about millennials?
Let's see. You're a millennial.
Yeah.
Well,
don't try and cheat off Aunt Eileen here.
Well, the ones I know are very nice.
Why do you think we're very nice?
Well, you're not smart alecky,
Well, thank you, Grandma. I think I can. Well, we can both be a little smart alecky sometimes, can't we?
Well, everybody's human.
When it comes down to it, no one really knows what it means to be a millennial, or a member of any other generation, and that's okay. In the words of Leopold von Ranke, every generation is equidistant from God.